"Sir, can you tell Santa we moved?" The 4-year-old boy asked the most powerful Mafia boss in New York on Christmas night. Snow fell in bitter silence, blanketing the Brooklyn sidewalks like a mute curtain pulled over the city. Christmas lights blinked from every window and lamppost. But the joy they promised felt far away, like a song drifting from another room. Scarlett Morgan, 27 years old, gripped her son's small hand as they stepped onto the frozen sidewalk. Her thin coat could not stop the December wind, and her breath escaped in pale clouds. Auburn brown hair was tied low beneath an old knit hat, with a few loose strands clinging to her cheeks, wet with melting snow. Her green eyes were rimmed red from exhaustion and sleepless nights. On her shoulder hung an old backpack holding all of Noah's clothes and a few personal things. That was everything they had. Behind them, the door to the 4th-floor apartment slammed shut. Evicted. The landlord had waited until the sun went down, waited until Christmas music from the building next door drowned out the sound of a suitcase clattering down the stairs. For the past 2 years, she had worked the night shift at the Velvet Room, smiling at drunken customers through aching legs and worn-out joints, trying to scrape together enough money to keep a roof over their heads. But tips from a bar waitress did not stretch through winter, not when most of it went into inhalers, medication, and $47,000 in hospital bills for Noah's asthma. She had tried. God, she had tried with everything she had. But now, on the coldest night in December, she was out of time. Noah stopped walking. He hugged his old, worn teddy bear named Mr. Buttons tight against his chest, and looked up at his mother with wide eyes, whispering, "Mom, if we move tonight, will Santa still be able to find me?" Scarlett's heart cracked like ice beneath a boot. Scarlett knelt down, not caring that the cold snow soaked straight through to her knees. She lifted Noah's small face, searching the wide eyes that waited for an answer. "Santa always finds good hearts, remember?" she said. Noah thought for a moment, then smiled, his first smile in this long, freezing night. "I hope he gives you a bag of happiness, Mom." Danically, Scarlett let out a soft laugh. A single tear slid down her cheek, but she wiped it away before her son could see. She pulled Noah into her arms, and in that moment, the past came rushing back like old film reels that could never be erased. 5 years earlier, Scarlett was 22, a senior nursing student at a university in Manhattan. The future lay open in front of her like a wide road, full of promise and hope. She was a strong student, well-liked by her professors, and she dreamed of the day she would slip into a white coat, caring for the patients who needed her. Then Ryan appeared. He was tall, charming, with a smile that could melt any heart. He promised her a beautiful life, a warm little home, children who would run through a backyard. Scarlett believed him. She believed every sweet word he whispered against her ear at night. When the test showed 2 red lines, Scarlett cried with happiness. She ran to Ryan, already imagining his face lighting up when he heard the news. But what she received was not a smile. It was silence, thick enough to choke on. Ryan looked at her like a burden that had just landed on his shoulders. "I'm not ready," he said, his voice cold as stone, and then he disappeared. No explanation, no phone call, no message. Just Scarlett, her belly growing by the day, and a heart shattered beyond repair. She had no one to lean on. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 18, just starting college. They had been on their way to her orientation when a truck lost control and slammed straight into them. Scarlett got the call from the hospital while she was unpacking in her dorm room. She ran there, but she only arrived in time to see 2 white sheets pulled over them. From that day on, she was alone. Alone with grief. Alone through nights. She cried until she had nothing left. Alone as she forced herself to stand up and keep walking. And now, alone as she faced motherhood. Noah was born on an autumn night, small and fragile as a leaf, newly fallen from a branch. Scarlett looked at him, tears spilling. But this time they were tears of joy. She swore she would give him everything she had, even if she had to trade away anything and everything else. 2 years ago, life, already hard, turned suddenly crueler than she thought it could. Noah was diagnosed with severe asthma. The doctor told her in a low, heavy voice that the boy would need daily inhalers, regular checkups, and hospital stays whenever an attack hit. The bills piled up like boulders on Scarlett's shoulders. $47,000, a number she did not dare say out loud, afraid it would crush her where she stood. Scarlett had to leave school with only 1 semester left before graduation. Her dream of the white coat dissolved like morning mist. She started working 2 jobs, cleaning office buildings during the day, serving at the Velvet Room at night. There were weeks when she slept only 3 to 4 hours each night. There were days she went hungry so Noah could have milk, medicine, everything he needed. She grew thinner, her green eyes sinking deeper and deeper, But the smile she gave her son never went out. Every night, even when she was so tired she could barely lift her feet, she still told Noah stories. She still kissed his forehead and whispered that everything would be okay. She had tried. God, she had tried with everything in her. But now, standing in the snowy night with her 4-year-old in her hand and an old backpack on her shoulder, Scarlett did not know how much longer she could keep trying. She rose, gripped Noah's hand tighter, and kept walking. No destination, no plan, only exhausted legs and a heart that refused to quit. They had been walking for about 20 minutes when Noah's steps began to slow. His little shoes were not thick enough to fight the snow that had risen to his ankles, and Scarlett could feel his hand trembling inside hers. "Mom, my feet are so cold," Noah whispered, his voice weak, almost crying, but trying hard to hold it back. Scarlett stopped and bent down to look at him. Noah's small lips had gone pale from the cold, his cheeks flushed, not from warmth, but from the cutting wind. She did not say anything. She only quietly took off the only scarf around her own neck and wrapped it around him, another layer, tighter, safer. Then she lifted Noah into her arms, settling him against her hip, one arm locked around him, the other steadying the old backpack on her shoulder. Noah curled his arms around her neck and rested his head on her shoulder. Mr. Buttons pressed tight between them. "Go to sleep, honey," Scarlett whispered. "Mom will handle it." How? She did not know. The city at night glittered with colored lights, like a fairy tale painting that she and her child were not allowed to step into. They passed a small Italian restaurant, warm inside with candlelight. Through the fogged glass, Scarlett saw a family eating dinner, parents laughing, 2 children fighting over a piece of bread. They were so happy, so unaware that outside there was a mother carrying her child through the snow, with no idea where they would sleep tonight. Scarlett swallowed hard and walked faster, as if she could outrun the sight. They passed a toy store that still had its lights on, though it was nearly closing. In the display window were brand new teddy bears, remote control cars, dolls with shining blonde hair. Noah did not look, or maybe he was too tired to. But Scarlett saw. She saw everything she could not buy for him. She saw the small dreams of a 4-year-old that she did not have the power to give. Mr. Buttons was worn thin, the stuffing inside flattened, one eye gone for a long time now. But it was the only toy Noah had, and he loved it more than anything in this world. The wind grew stronger, and the snow began to fall heavier. Scarlett felt her legs starting to give. Noah did not weigh much, but after 20 minutes of carrying him through the snow, her shoulders burned. Her back ached as if it might break. She tried to think of somewhere they could go. Friends. She did not have anyone close enough to call in the middle of the night and ask for a place to stay. Coworkers from the Velvet Room. They all had their own lives, and Scarlett had never been close enough to anyone to ask for anything. She pulled her phone from her pocket, 7% battery. Not enough for a long call. Not enough to search for a cheap room. Not enough to do anything useful. She shoved it back into her pocket, hopeless. A luxury car swept past, its tires kicking up dirty slush that nearly splattered her. Scarlett stepped aside and pulled Noah tighter against her. He was asleep now, breathing evenly, warm against her neck. At least he is resting, she thought. At least in his dreams, he does not have to know how desperate his mother is. They went a little farther, and Scarlett truly could not take another step. Her feet felt nailed to the road, her knees shook, her body so exhausted it had gone numb. She stopped beneath a street lamp, its pale yellow light falling like a weak halo in the darkness. Scarlett leaned her back against the pole and panted. Her breath turned into white clouds that disappeared quickly in the cold air. She looked around. The street was empty. Storefronts were switching off their lights one by one. Christmas night. Everyone had somewhere to go. Everyone had a home to gather in. Only she and her child stood here, in falling snow and cutting wind, with no idea where they would go tonight. Tears rose, but Scarlett bit her lip and forced them back. She could not cry. She could not collapse. Not now. But her body was at its limit, and her heart was breaking into pieces, one by one. A few blocks away, the glass doors of the Grand Millennium swung open, and Vincent Russo stepped into the cold night. Music and laughter from the company Christmas party still spilled out behind him, but he did not look back. A black cashmere coat lay over a perfectly tailored 3-piece suit. His dark hair was slicked neatly back, and his steel, cold gray eyes stared straight ahead. At 36, Vincent Russo was a name that made all of New York either respect you or fear you. He owned the city's most exclusive chain of restaurants, bars, and nightclubs, but everyone knew that was only the surface of a far more powerful underground empire. He was the boss, the head of the Russo family, and in his world, there was no room for weakness. Marcus, his trusted bodyguard, followed a step behind with a black umbrella in hand. "Sir, the car is ready." Vincent shook his head. "I want to walk. Send the car ahead." Marcus hesitated for a second, but he did not dare argue. He nodded, then disappeared into the sleek black Maybach waiting at the curb. Vincent began to walk, alone, through the falling snow. He did not need an umbrella. He did not need a heavier coat. The cold outside was nothing compared to the emptiness gnawing at him from the inside. The party he had just left had been lavish to the point of showing off. Expensive champagne flowed like water. The food was arranged in elaborate displays, and dozens of people clustered around him with fake smiles and hollow congratulations. They feared him. They needed him. They wanted his attention, but not one of them truly cared about him. Vincent left early because he could not endure another second. Christmas night. He hated this day. He hated it down to the bone. 10 years earlier, on Christmas night, his mother had died, Isabella Russo, the only woman in this world who had ever loved him without conditions. She had raised him alone when his father went to prison. She had worked herself to exhaustion so he would have food and clothes. She had sacrificed her youth so he could stay in school. And when she lay in that hospital bed, breath thin and fading, waiting to see her son one last time, Vincent was in jail for assault. He did not make it back. When the prison doors opened for him the next morning, his mother was already gone. She had waited for him all night. She had called his name until her last breath, and he was not there. Vincent remembered dropping to his knees beside that cold hospital bed, clutching his mother's stiffening hand, and crying like a child. That was the last time he ever cried. After that, his heart turned to stone. He built his empire with cruelty and ice, never allowing anyone close. He had everything money could buy, but he had no one to share it with. Every Christmas night, he drank alone in an empty penthouse, staring out at the lit-up city, thinking of the woman who had loved him more than anyone else ever would. Vincent kept walking without a destination, letting his footsteps carry him farther from the fake party, farther from flattering faces, farther from the loneliness tightening around his throat. He turned onto a smaller street in Brooklyn, where the lights were fewer and the air was quieter. Snow fell softly, settling on his shoulders like the sky's tears. And then he saw them. Beneath a street lamp ahead, a woman stood there, her back against the pole as if she might collapse. In her arms was a small child asleep, and an old backpack sagged on her shoulder as if it carried the whole world. Vincent slowed, his gray eyes narrowing in the darkness. The instincts of a man who lived in the underworld made him look closer. Auburn hair spilled from beneath an old knit hat. A slender figure, fragile and yet stubbornly strong. Her shoulders trembled with cold, but she held the child tight as if he were the most precious thing on earth. He recognized her. Scarlett. She worked at the Velvet Room, the most high-end bar in his empire. He remembered her because she was not like the others. She always arrived on time, never complained, never flirted with customers for bigger tips the way the other girls did. Once he had seen her give half of her tips to a coworker who was struggling. Another time, he had seen her quietly hand leftover food from the kitchen to a homeless man. She did not know he had seen, and he had never said a word. But why was she here, on Christmas night, with a child in her arms and a face that looked ready to break? Vincent stepped forward, snow crunching beneath his expensive leather shoes. And when there were only a few steps between them, he spoke, his low voice carrying through the empty night. "Scarlett?" Scarlett flinched and turned, her green eyes widening in shock. For a heartbeat, she thought she was dreaming, or so exhausted she had started hallucinating. But the man standing in front of her was real, tall and imposing in a flawless black suit, gray eyes fixed on her with something she could not read. "Mr. Russo," she blurted, her voice trembling for reasons that had nothing to do with the cold. Shame hit her like a massive wave and pulled her under. Out of everyone she could have run into tonight, why did it have to be her boss? Why did he have to see her like this, hair a mess, face gone pale with the cold, holding her child on a street corner like someone with nowhere to belong? She lowered her head, avoiding his gaze. I was just... The words stuck in her throat. What could she say? That she had just been thrown out of her apartment, that she had nowhere to go, that she was standing here on Christmas night with her 4-year-old in her arms, and she did not know where they were going to sleep. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the wind whistling through bare branches and the soft fall of snow. Vincent did not ask. He did not press. He simply stood there, watching her with sharp eyes that held no judgment. And then Noah stirred. The boy slowly lifted his head from his mother's shoulder, sleepy eyes blinking at the tall stranger in front of them. Mr. Buttons was still pinned tight in his small arms, and his knit hat had slipped, revealing curls of brown hair. Noah studied Vincent for a long moment, as if deciding whether this man was safe. Then he spoke, his voice clear as glass, cutting through the quiet night. "Sir, can you tell Santa we moved, so he can find us and give my mom a bag of happiness?" The world seemed to stop turning. Vincent froze, gray eyes widening. A simple sentence from a 4-year-old, innocent and earnest, went straight through every wall he had spent 10 years building. A bag of happiness, not a toy, not candy, not anything for himself. This child, freezing in the middle of winter, wanted Santa to give his mother a bag of happiness. Vincent looked down into the wide eyes waiting for an answer, and he saw himself in them. He saw the boy he used to be, sitting by the window every Christmas night, waiting for a father who never came home. He saw the child who had wished his mother did not have to work until she was worn down to bone. He saw everything he had tried to bury deep inside his heart, rising to the surface. Slowly, he bent down, one knee touching the frozen ground, bringing himself level with Noah. Snow clung to the expensive fabric of his suit, and he did not care. "Hey, kid," he said, his voice low, but so gentle it surprised even him. "Santa always knows where to find good children, and he will definitely want to know exactly where your mom is, especially when your mom has been that brave." "Wellsis," Noah smiled, bright as sunlight in the heart of winter. "Really? You know Santa?" Vincent nodded with solemn seriousness. "You could say that." Scarlett stood there, unable to speak. She watched the most powerful man in New York kneeling in the snow, talking to her son as if he were the most important thing in the world. Her eyes burned, but she bit her lip and held it in. Vincent rose, brushing snow from his knee with careless ease. He looked at Scarlett, and this time his gaze was not cold. Something had changed in those gray eyes, a glimmer she had never seen in her boss before. "Come with me," he said. Not a command, but not an offer either. "Let me get you and the boy something warm." Scarlett shook her head on instinct. "Mr. Russo, I cannot. I do not want to trouble you." "You are not troubling me," Vincent cut in, his voice firm. "Tonight is Christmas night. No one should be out in the cold like this. I have son his different." He looked at Noah, then back at Scarlett. "And I think Santa is going to want to know exactly where to find the two of you." Before Scarlett could argue again, Noah spoke up, his voice suddenly excited. "Mom, I want hot chocolate, please." She looked at her son, then at Vincent. Pride in her wanted to refuse, wanted to prove she could handle it on her own. But Noah's eyes were bright for the first time tonight, and she had no right to steal that small joy from him. In the end, she nodded. The cafe sat at the end of a narrow street, warm yellow light spilling through the windows like an invitation in the cruel winter night. Vincent pushed the door open and stepped inside, holding it for Scarlett and Noah as they followed behind him. Heat rushed out to meet them, wrapping around them like a gentle embrace. The place was small and quiet, with only a few customers scattered here and there, each one lost in their own world. The air carried the soft scent of roasted coffee and cinnamon, mingling with the slow, familiar melody of a classic Christmas song drifting from an old speaker on the shelf. Vincent guided them toward a hidden corner in the back, where a small table sat beside the window. He pulled out a chair for Scarlett and Noah, then took the seat across from them. The gesture was so natural Scarlett did not even have time to refuse. She settled Noah into the chair beside her. He still clutched Mr. Buttons tight, round eyes studying everything with quiet curiosity. A server approached, and Vincent ordered without touching the menu. 1 hot chocolate with whipped cream, 1 black coffee, and 1 hot coffee with milk. He glanced at Scarlett, then added, "and a plate of ginger cookies." A few minutes later, the hot chocolate was set in front of Noah. The boy's eyes lit up like 2 tiny stars. Whipped cream swirled on top, and the sweet smell of chocolate rose in tempting waves. Noah looked at his mother for permission, and when Scarlett nodded, he lifted the cup carefully and took a small sip. A smear of cream stuck to his nose, but he did not care. He only smiled, pure and happy. It was the first smile Scarlett had seen from her son tonight that was not forced. Scarlett wrapped both hands around her hot coffee with milk, letting the warmth seep into fingers that had gone numb. Her hands trembled, not only from the cold, but from exhaustion, from tension, from everything this night had done to her. She tried to hold it together. She did not want to look weak in front of her boss, but her body had reached its limit. Across from her, Vincent sat with his black coffee in his hands, yet he did not drink. He watched her, his gray eyes calm and steady, like a lake with no ripples. He did not ask. He did not ask why she had been standing outside on Christmas night. He did not ask why everything she owned hung from her shoulder in an old backpack. He did not ask why her eyes were red, why her shoulders shook. He only sat there and waited in silence, giving her space to breathe, to settle, to decide whether she wanted to speak. And that silence was not heavy. It was not uncomfortable. It felt like a thin blanket, warm enough to protect her, but not so thick it made her feel trapped. Scarlett took a small sip of coffee. The sweet warmth slid down her throat, and she felt herself slowly thaw. Vincent watched her, and images rose in his mind. Things he had seen over time that she never knew. He remembered the first time he truly noticed her, about 6 months ago. He had come to the Velvet Room to check on the business like he often did, and among the noise and chaos of the staff, she stood there quietly wiping tables long after her shift had ended. She did not complain. She did not check the time. She did what needed to be done, then left without a word. He remembered another night, when she split her tips in half and gave them to a new girl crying in the kitchen because she could not afford her rent. Scarlett did not say much. She simply pressed the money into the girl's hand and whispered, "It'll be okay," then walked away as if it were the most normal thing in the world. He remembered the time she slipped out the back door with a box of leftovers and handed it to a homeless man who often sat on the corner. She did it when she thought no one was watching, and she never told anyone. Vincent knew it all. He always watched. He always remembered. That was how he survived in this world. But with Scarlett, he did not watch to find weakness. He watched because she was different, because she was a small streak of light in his dark world, and he could not pull his eyes away. She was one of the few people he had ever seen without a mask. No schemes, no pretense, just herself, tired but unbreakable, poor but generous, hurting but still smiling at others. Noah had finished half his hot chocolate and began to yawn, again and again. He leaned his head against his mother's shoulder, Mr. Buttons pinned to his chest, and his eyes slowly drifted closed. Scarlett wrapped an arm around him to keep him from slipping, while her other hand still held her coffee like a lifeline. Vincent looked at them, and something unfamiliar rose inside his chest. It was not pity. He hated pity, and he knew she did too. It was respect. Admiration for a woman who had carried too much and still stayed standing, still protected her child with everything she had. He said nothing. He only stayed there, waiting for her to be ready. The silence stretched on for a few more minutes. Scarlett stared down at the coffee in her hands. The heat had softened, but it was still warm. She did not know why, but Vincent's quiet, unjudging presence made her feel safe enough to speak. Maybe because she was too tired to keep pretending. Maybe because tonight had stolen the last of her strength, the strength it took to build walls. Or maybe, simply, because she needed to say it out loud, just once, to someone. "I got thrown out tonight," she began, her voice light as breath. 3 months behind on rent. The landlord waited until it was dark before he knocked. She did not look at Vincent. She kept her eyes on the coffee as if she were talking to herself. "I do not blame him. He has a family too, bills too. I understand. Here." Vincent said nothing. He only listened. Scarlett drew a long breath and continued. She told him about Ryan, the man who promised her the world, then vanished the moment he found out she was pregnant. There was no bitterness in her voice, no anger, only the bare truth as it was. He was not ready, so he left. That was all. She told Vincent about her parents, about the car crash that took them when she was 18, right before her first day of college. She told him about the years of carrying everything alone, with no one to lean on, no one to call in the middle of the night, when loneliness tightened around her throat. Then she told him about Noah, about the day, 2 years ago, when the doctor said severe asthma, about the emergency hospital trips in the middle of the night, about how the sound of ambulance sirens had become familiar in the worst way, about the helplessness of watching her child gasp for breath and having nothing to do but pray the medicine worked, about $47,000 in medical bills, stacked like a mountain she could not climb. "I left school," she said, her voice still steady, almost flat. "1 semester away from graduating nursing, but I did not have a choice. Noah needed inhalers, doctors, everything money can buy, and I just had to work." She told him about 2 jobs every day, about nights when she slept 3 or 4 hours, then forced herself up again, about legs that ached so badly she sometimes thought she would collapse right on the bar floor. She told him about skipping meals so Noah could have milk, about drinking tap water to get through the day because there was no money left for food, about selling one thing after another from the apartment until there was nothing valuable left. "I tried," she said, and for the first time her voice shook. "I tried everything I could, but it feels like it is never enough." She stopped and took a deep breath to steady herself. No tears, no sobbing, only the deep exhaustion of someone who had fought too long and too alone. Vincent sat in silence while she spoke. He did not interrupt. He did not offer empty comfort. He did not look at her with pity. He simply listened, truly listened, gray eyes steady on her face. In his mind, thoughts turned over and over. He had met many people in his life, the strong and the weak, the brave and the cowardly. He had watched men break under trials far smaller than what she carried. But the woman sitting across from him, hands trembling, eyes red from exhaustion, still sat with her back straight, still told her story, without begging for mercy. She was stronger than most men he knew, Vincent thought, and she did not even realize it. He glanced at Noah. The boy was asleep now, his head resting on his mother's shoulder, mouth slightly open. A streak of chocolate whipped cream still clung to his nose, and Mr. Buttons was held tight in his small arms as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. He looked strangely peaceful, unaware of how cruel the outside world had been to his mother. Vincent reached into his coat and pulled out a pristine white handkerchief. He leaned forward and gently wiped the cream from Noah's nose. The motion was so careful, so quiet, that Scarlett could only stare in surprise. This was the most powerful mafia boss in New York, the man the whole city feared, wiping the nose of a 4-year-old boy as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Vincent slipped the handkerchief back into his pocket, then looked Scarlett straight in the eye. "There is a place you and the boy can stay tonight," he said, his voice low, steady, not forceful. "Warm, safe, just temporary, until you figure out your next step." Scarlett shook her head at once, pride flaring inside her like a small flame in winter. "Mr. Russo, I cannot take anything else. You already bought the drinks. You already listened to me ramble on for—" Her voice caught. "I do not want to be a burden. I can handle it." She said it with conviction, even though she did not know how she would handle it. It was late. The snow was still falling hard outside, and in her pocket, she had only a few loose dollars left. Even the cheapest motels were out of reach, and letting Noah sleep out in the freezing night was not an option. But pride had carried her through the last few years. It was the only thing she still had when everything else was gone. Vincent did not argue. He understood that kind of pride. He had seen it in his mother's eyes once, when she refused help from neighbors even with an empty refrigerator. He also knew that sometimes that same pride could turn into chains, keeping a person trapped in suffering. But before he could say anything more, Noah stirred. The little boy slowly opened his eyes, sleepy, blinking around, then looked up at his mother. His voice was thick with sleep, but clear enough for both adults to hear. "Mom, can we stay? Just so Santa can find me?" Scarlett looked at him, and her heart tightened. Noah's wide eyes searched her face, not understanding what was happening, only trusting, completely, that his mother would make it okay. He was not asking for toys, not for candy, just a place where Santa could find him. How could she say no to that? She looked at Vincent, hesitation still caught in her eyes. He did not push. He did not add a single word. He simply waited for her to decide. And it was that respect, that patient, non-demanding quiet, that finally made her nod. "Okay," she whispered. "Just tonight." Vincent rose, left a few bills on the table, and guided them out into the night. A black Maybach was already waiting at the curb. Marcus stood by the door, expressionless. He opened it for them without asking a single question, as if he was used to his boss doing the unexpected. They drove for about 15 minutes through Brooklyn's quiet streets. Scarlett sat in silence, Noah in her arms, staring out the window without really seeing anything. She was too tired to think, too exhausted to worry. She only wanted rest, even if it was only for a few hours. The car stopped in front of an older building, carefully maintained. Not a luxury hotel, not a gleaming penthouse the way she had feared, just a normal apartment building in a quiet residential neighborhood. Vincent led them up to the 3rd floor and unlocked the door to a small apartment. Inside it was warm and clean, furnished simply but fully. A small living room, a tidy kitchen, 2 bedrooms. A heater in the corner hummed softly, sending out a gentle, steady warmth. "This apartment belongs to a associate," Vincent explained, his tone calm. "He is overseas for a few months. It is empty. Leaving it unused would be a waste." Scarlett looked around, unsure what to say. The place was simple, but warm. Nothing like what she had imagined when she thought of a mafia boss's life. No excess, no display, only safety and heat in the middle of a brutal winter night. Noah had fallen asleep on her shoulder, breathing evenly, peaceful. Vincent stepped closer, and before Scarlett could react, he gently took the boy from her arms. The way he moved was careful, practiced, as if he had done this 1,000 times. He carried Noah into the smaller bedroom and laid him on a bed already made with crisp white sheets. Then he bent down and carefully removed the little shoes, wet from snow, placing them neatly at the foot of the bed. He pulled the blanket up, tucked it around the child, then placed Mr. Buttons into Noah's arms. Scarlett stood in the doorway, watching in silence. She saw Vincent's strong hands. Hands she knew had done frightening things in the underworld, now smoothing a blanket for a 4-year-old boy. She saw his cold, gray eyes soften as he watched Noah sleep. She saw another side of the most powerful mafia boss in New York, a side not many people would ever witness. Vincent straightened, stepped out, and pulled the door almost closed, careful not to let it click. He turned to Scarlett. "Get some rest. We will figure out the rest in the morning." Then he turned away and headed for the front door. His hand had already closed around the knob when Scarlett's voice reached him from behind. "Why?" He stopped, but he did not turn around. "Why are you doing all of this?" A pause. Then Vincent answered, his voice low and distant. "Because once, someone did this for my mother, and she never forgot." He opened the door and walked out, leaving Scarlett standing alone in the warm apartment, with too many thoughts spinning through her mind. Morning sunlight slipped through the thin curtains, laying warm, golden streaks across the wooden floor of the small apartment. Scarlett opened her eyes slowly, taking a few seconds to remember where she was. The bed was soft, the blanket was warm, and the air in the room was no longer sharp with cold, the way it had been for so many nights before. She had slept deeper than she had in months. No sirens yanking her awake, no neighbors shouting through thin walls, no jolting up in the middle of the night with rent on her mind or hospital bills pressing down on her chest. The sound of little feet pattering across the floor pulled her out of her thoughts. The bedroom door flew open, and Noah burst in, his eyes bright as 2 morning stars. "Mom! Santa found us!" he shouted, climbing onto the bed and throwing his arms around her, his voice full of excitement. Scarlett hugged him close, still not understanding what was happening. She got up, letting Noah tug her by the hand into the living room. And there, right in front of the apartment door, was a neatly placed brown paper bag. Scarlett bent and picked it up. Inside was a fresh loaf of bread, still warm, a carton of milk, a small packet of butter, and a neatly folded note. She opened it and recognized the clean, strong handwriting, written with careful precision. "For brave mornings and winters that are gentler. V." Scarlett stood still, the note in her hand. Her fingers traced the ink, feeling each line as if she could somehow understand the man who had written it. She pressed the paper to her chest, her eyes burning, but no tears fell. Not yet. Noah had already climbed into the small dining table chair, waiting for breakfast with eager impatience. Scarlett drew a deep breath, folded the note, slid it into her pocket, and began to prepare food for her son. The days that followed passed like a strange dream Scarlett did not dare believe was real. Every morning, there was a bag of fresh food outside the door. Sometimes it was bread and eggs, sometimes fruit and milk, always enough for the 2 of them to eat all day. There were no more notes, but she knew who it was from. Marcus, the tall bodyguard with the unreadable face, came by occasionally. He did not say much. He only asked a few short questions, whether she needed anything, whether there were any problems, then nodded and left. The way he watched the apartment and the street around it made it clear he was doing more than checking in. He was guarding them. On the 3rd day, someone called. A professional woman's voice told Scarlett there was a medical appointment for Noah at Dr. Reynolds' office the next day. All costs had been paid in advance. Scarlett wanted to refuse, but this was her child's health. She did not have the right to let pride stand in Noah's way. Dr. Reynolds was a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and a kind smile. He examined Noah carefully, prescribed new medication, and showed Scarlett how to care for him more effectively. When she asked about the cost, he only smiled and told her everything had been taken care of, that she should focus on caring for the boy. He did not say who had arranged it, but the way he mentioned Vincent, like an old friend, gave her the answer. On the way home, Noah held his mother's hand and bounced along the sidewalk. He chattered happily about the nice doctor, about the office with toys, about the candy he got afterward for being brave. Scarlett listened and smiled for her son, but inside her mind was spinning. She knew who had arranged all of this. She knew who was quietly making sure they had food every day, a warm place to sleep, a good doctor to care for Noah. Vincent Russo, the mafia boss the whole city feared. He was protecting them in a way no one would ever expect. And Scarlett did not know what she was supposed to feel about that. A week passed, and Scarlett was still in the temporary apartment with Noah, waking each morning with the strange, unfamiliar feeling of having slept full hours, of not having to worry about the next meal. She had started searching for a cheap room to rent, doing the math again and again, trying to figure out where she could afford to keep Noah safe with the little she had saved and the paycheck from the Velvet Room. But every place she found was either too expensive or in an area that was not safe for a 4-year-old child. On the morning of the 8th day, when Scarlett opened the door to take in the usual bag of food, she saw a white envelope lying beside the brown paper bag. Her heart beat faster as she picked it up. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a shiny key and a neatly folded note. She unfolded the paper and recognized the familiar handwriting. Rent is paid for 3 months. Not charity. Just time. Below it was an address in Brooklyn, along with a smaller line added beneath. Near Lincoln Public Preschool. Noah is enrolled for the spring term. Scarlett read the note again and again, not trusting her own eyes. 3 months of rent, an apartment of their own, and her son in school. Everything she had chased for years and could never quite reach was suddenly sitting in the palm of her hand, delivered in a small envelope. She stood there a long time, fighting with herself. Pride inside her screamed that she could not take more, that she already owed too much, that she did not want to become anyone's burden. But another part of her, the part worn thin after years of fighting alone, whispered that sometimes accepting help did not mean weakness. The sound of Noah's footsteps running toward her pulled her back. He saw the key in her hand, eyes wide. "Mom, what is that?" Scarlett crouched down until she was level with him. "It is a key to a new home, maybe." Noah was quiet for a moment, as if thinking about something very important. Then he looked up, his voice small, but full of hope. "Is it our forever home, Mom?" That simple question pierced Scarlett straight through. For 4 years, Noah had been moved from place to place. He had never had a real home to call his own. He deserved stability. He deserved a place that felt safe. And if Vincent was giving them a chance at that, she did not have the right to refuse out of pride. "We will go see it," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. That afternoon, mother and son stood in front of an older building in Brooklyn, carefully maintained. The neighborhood was quiet and clean, trees lining the sidewalks, a small park at the end of the street. Lincoln Preschool was only 2 blocks away, close enough that Scarlett could walk Noah there every morning. She unlocked the apartment with the new key, and Noah ran in first. The place was small but cozy, with a neat living room, a clean kitchen, and the thing that made Noah squeal with happiness: 2 separate bedrooms. "Mom, I have my own room," he cried, jumping onto the small bed in his room, hugging Mr. Buttons and rolling back and forth on the soft mattress. Scarlett stood in the doorway, eyes blurred with tears. For the first time in 4 years, Noah had a room of his own. A week later, Scarlett returned to work at the Velvet Room. She had braced herself for stares, for whispers about how she had vanished for days and suddenly had a new place to live. But what surprised her was that Vincent treated her completely normally, as if nothing had happened. He nodded at her when he passed, the same quiet nod he gave every other employee. He did not ask her questions, did not show too much concern, did not do anything that would make her stand out in the crowd. He gave her space. He gave her normal. He gave her the feeling that she was still a woman earning her living with her own hands, not someone receiving favors. And that was exactly what she needed. Respect, not pity. 3 weeks passed in a peace that felt almost unreal. Scarlett began to settle into the rhythm of her new life. In the morning, she walked Noah to Lincoln Preschool. In the afternoon, she picked him up, made dinner, then headed out for the night shift at the Velvet Room. Noah loved his new school. Every day he came home chattering about his kind teacher, his new friends, the pictures he drew. The small apartment slowly became a real home, with Noah's messy drawings taped to the walls and his bright laughter filling the mornings. But life never allowed Scarlett to stay calm for long. That night, around 2 a.m, she woke to violent coughing from Noah's room. She ran in, and her blood went cold at what she saw. Noah was sitting up in bed, both hands gripping his chest, his face pale, his lips beginning to turn blue. He tried to breathe, but the air would not seem to reach his lungs. Each breath came out as a harsh, wheezing whistle that terrified her. "Baby, Noah." Scarlett lunged to his side, hands shaking as she searched the nightstand drawer for his inhaler. She pressed it to Noah's mouth, but he could not pull the medicine in. The spasms in his lungs were too strong. This was the worst attack she had ever seen, worse than the ones before, and she knew the regular inhaler would not be enough. She dialed 911 with trembling fingers, her voice breaking as she spoke to the dispatcher. Every second of waiting felt like an hour. All she could do was hold her son tight, trying to keep him calm while she herself was panicking so hard she could barely breathe. The ambulance arrived with sirens screaming through the night. They lifted Noah onto a stretcher, placed an oxygen mask over his small face, and Scarlett climbed in after him, her hand never leaving his for even a second. She watched her son lying still, his chest rising weakly beneath a white blanket, and she prayed to anything that might be listening, begging it not to take away the only child she had. At the hospital, Noah was rushed straight into the emergency room. Scarlett was stopped at the double doors, left to stare through a small window as doctors and nurses surrounded her boy. She stood there with her back against the cold wall, legs shaking as if they might give out at any moment. Time crawled like dripping water. Each minute was its own kind of torture. Then the doors opened. Dr. Reynolds stepped out, still in his white coat, his face tired, but his smile steady and reassuring. "He is out of immediate danger," the doctor said. "We have the attack under control, and his breathing is stable." Scarlett nearly collapsed with relief. She clung to the doctor's arm, tears spilling freely, uncontrollable. "Thank you. Thank you." Dr. Reynolds patted her shoulder gently. "Try to stay calm. Noah will need to stay for observation a few days, and we will adjust his treatment plan." He paused, then added softly, "And as for the cost, do not worry. Everything has been taken care of." Scarlett looked up at him, eyes still wet. She did not need to ask who. The answer was already there. 2 days later, after Noah was stronger, sleeping peacefully in his hospital room with an intravenous line taped to his arm, Scarlett left the hospital. She took a taxi to the Velvet Room and walked in just as the place was about to close. The staff were cleaning up, and Vincent sat alone at the corner of the bar, slowly turning a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked up when he saw her, gray eyes giving nothing away. Scarlett walked over and stopped in front of him. She did not circle the truth. "You paid Noah's hospital bill." It was not a question. Vincent set the glass down and looked straight into her eyes. He did not deny it. "Is he okay?" "He is out of danger." Scarlett clenched her hands into fists at her sides. "Why are you doing this? The apartment, the rent, the doctor, and now the hospital. What are you expecting from me?" Vincent rose, towering over her by nearly a head. He looked down at her, and for the first time Scarlett saw something in those gray eyes that was not cold. Something deeper. Something she could not name. "I am not expecting anything," he said, his voice low and slow. "He is a good boy. He does not deserve to suffer because of money." He paused, then continued. "And you have carried enough." Scarlett stood there, unable to speak. She had come ready with refusals, with arguments to defend the last scraps of her pride. But looking into Vincent's eyes now, she could not force any of them out, because for the first time, she understood he was not handing down charity. He was giving away something he had probably spent his whole life wishing someone would give him, care that did not demand repayment. 2 months had passed since the night Noah was rushed to the emergency room. Life for mother and son slowly settled into something steady, with mornings spent walking him to school, afternoons cooking in their small, cozy kitchen, and nights working at the Velvet Room. Noah was much healthier under the new treatment plan, and his smile returned, bright as if nothing had ever happened. The only thing that changed was Vincent. He began showing up at the club more often. Before, he stopped by once or twice a month to check on business. Now he came almost 3 or 4 times a week. He usually sat in his familiar corner at the bar, drank a glass of whiskey, and watched everything with gray eyes that missed nothing. Scarlett tried not to notice, but she noticed anyway. She noticed how his gaze often rested on her longer than it needed to. On weekends, when Scarlett had to bring Noah with her because she had no one to watch him, the little boy grew close to Vincent in a way that startled her. Noah was not afraid of the cold man all of New York feared. He ran up to Vincent with his messy drawings, eager to show off what he had made. "Uncle Vincent, look, I drew the house me and Mom live in. And this is Mr. Buttons, and this is you." Vincent took the drawing, brows knitting as if he were judging a masterpiece in a museum. "This blue is very good," he said seriously. "But the door needs more detail. A good home needs a strong door. If we..." Noah nodded hard, like he had just received advice from a true expert. He dashed off to grab his crayons, determined to fix the picture exactly the way Vincent suggested. Scarlett stood behind the bar, watching it all in silence as something strange rose inside her chest. Then came a night of heavy rain, the sky pouring like a broken bucket and the wind lashing in wild bursts. The club was quieter than usual, only a few customers scattered around. Scarlett was drying glasses behind the bar when the door swung open and Vincent walked in. He was soaked from head to toe, dark hair plastered to his forehead, his expensive cashmere coat drenched through to the lining. Rainwater dripped from him onto the marble floor, yet his face stayed calm, as if he had been strolling under clear sunshine. Scarlett watched him for a moment, then disappeared into the kitchen without a word. 10 minutes later she returned with a small tray. On it sat a steaming bowl of ginger porridge and a hot cup of lemon tea with honey. She set the tray in front of Vincent, still saying nothing, then turned as if to leave. "Sit," Vincent said. His voice was not a command. It sounded more like an invitation. "We are closing soon. You can take a break." Scarlett hesitated for a second, then pulled out a chair and sat across from him. Vincent looked at the bowl, then at her. "You do not have to do this." You look like you are about to catch a cold," she answered, calm. "Ginger porridge is good for someone who got soaked." That is basic knowledge. Something flickered through Vincent's gray eyes. Maybe surprise, maybe amusement. He picked up the spoon, took a bite, and brought it to his mouth. The warmth spread down his throat, carrying the gentle sweetness of ginger and something else he could not quite name. "Good," he said simply. Scarlett did not respond. She only looked out through the glass where the rain still crashed down like a waterfall. The silence between them did not feel heavy anymore. It felt easier, as if they had grown used to the presence of each other. "Where did you learn to cook?" Vincent asked after a long while. "On my own," Scarlett said. "When my parents died, I had to handle everything. Cooking was one of those things." Vincent nodded. He did not offer empty condolences. He understood loss. He understood what it meant to stand up alone when no one was left beside you. They talked late into that night. About small things and about things that were not small at all. About work, about life, about the books Scarlett wanted to read if she ever had time. About the places Vincent had been, but never stayed long enough to actually feel. For the first time, they spoke like equals. Not boss and employee, not giver and receiver. Just two human beings searching for a little connection in a world that could be brutally lonely. That night, when the porridge bowl was half empty and the lemon tea was only barely warm, Vincent began to talk. For the first time in his life, he opened himself to someone who did not belong to his world. Someone who did not need his past in order to judge him or fear him. He told her about his childhood in the Brooklyn slums, about the cramped apartment where he grew up with his mother. His father went to prison when Vincent was 5, and from then on, Isabella Russo carried everything alone. She worked 3 jobs a day, from cleaning houses for the wealthy to taking in laundry at night. Her hands cracked from soap and cold water, but she never complained, not once. "My mother used to say," Vincent told her, his voice low and distant. "People could take everything from her, money, a home, her honor, but no one could take the love she had for her son. She said that was the only thing that truly belonged to her." Scarlett listened without interrupting. She watched Vincent's gray eyes soften when he spoke of his mother, a tenderness she had never seen in him before. "I grew up in hunger and violence," he continued. "The streets taught me how to survive, and I learned fast. At 16, I was working for men my mother prayed I would never meet. At 20, I went to prison the first time for beating a man who insulted her. Infacted." He paused, slowly turning the cup of tea that had gone cold in his hand. The cafe's yellow light threw shadows across his face, sharpening the angles of his features and the pain held behind his eyes. "My mother got sick while I was serving time. She did not tell me because she did not want me to worry. She still came to see me every week, smiling, telling me everything was fine." His voice trembled, and for the first time Scarlett heard a crack in that calm, controlled tone. "On Christmas night that year, she died. I got the news while I was sitting in my cell, staring through the bars at snow falling from the sky. They would not let me go. When I got out the next morning, she was already gone." Silence settled over them. Scarlett felt her eyes burn, but she did not cry. She only looked at Vincent, at the man sitting across from her, with old wounds slowly showing beneath the cold armor he wore. "After that, I built everything," Vincent said, steady again, but carrying a sorrow that ran deep. "I built an empire my mother never dared to dream of. I have money, power, everything people call success, but I never had anyone to share it with. Never." He looked straight into Scarlett's eyes. "Not until I found you and that boy under the streetlight in the snow." Scarlett did not know what to say. She only sat there, feeling her heart beat in strange new rhythms she thought she would never feel again after Ryan. After that night, everything between them changed in a way that was subtle, but unmistakable. Their eyes lingered on each other longer. Accidental touches when passing a glass of water felt like they carried meaning. Vincent still came to the club often, but now he did not only sit alone in his corner at the bar. He sat closer to where Scarlett worked, and sometimes they exchanged small smiles no one else noticed. Noah was the first to name what was growing between them. One afternoon, when Vincent came to pick up Scarlett and Noah after school to drive them home because the rain was coming down hard, Noah ran up and wrapped his arms around Vincent's leg, shouting, "Santa's helper is here." Scarlett almost dropped the umbrella in her hand. Vincent blinked, surprised, then bent down to look at Noah. "Why do you call me that?" "Because you helped Santa find me and Mom," Noah explained, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "You brought us a new home. You brought a good doctor. And you make Mom smile more. Santa is really busy, so he needs a helper like you." Vincent did not speak. He only stood there, staring at the child. And Scarlett, a few steps away, saw Vincent's gray eyes brighten in a way she had never seen. Not coldness, not sadness, but the pure happiness of a man who had just been handed something priceless. From then on, Noah called Vincent Santa's helper, and every time the boy said it, Scarlett felt her heart tremble a little more. She knew she was standing on the edge of something enormous, something she had sworn she would never let herself fall into again. But when she watched Vincent lift Noah onto his shoulder and hold the umbrella over both mother and son as they walked through the rain, she realized it might already be too late to turn back. It started with stolen looks and muffled giggles every time Scarlett walked by. She tried not to pay attention, telling herself she was imagining too much. But then the whispers grew clearer, loud enough that she could hear every word while she wiped tables in the shadowed corner of the club. "She's sleeping with the boss," Brittany's voice carried from behind the bar, loud enough for the people around her to hear. "You don't see it? He comes in a few times a week just to watch her. And suddenly she's got a new apartment, her kids in a good school, the hospital bills are paid. You think that's a coincidence?" Another girl gave a sharp, mean little laugh. "Single mom with a tragic backstory. Classic. She knows how to play people. Gotta admit, she's smart," Brittany went on, dripping with sarcasm. "Tears. And a little kid. Enough to wrap a Mafia boss around her pinky. Wish I had a kid I could use too." Laughter burst out. Scarlett stood frozen, her hand gripping the cleaning rag so hard her knuckles turned white. She wanted to walk over. She wanted to face them. She wanted to tell them they did not know a thing about her life, but her feet would not move. Instead, she turned away, stepped into the staff break room, and shut the door. She leaned back against the wall, closed her eyes, and tried to control the breath that was turning sharp and fast. "It is just gossip," she told herself. "Cruel gossip. They do not know anything. They do not understand. So why did it hurt so much?" That night, after she brought Noah home and coaxed him to sleep, Scarlett sat alone by the window, staring out at the city. New York's lights blinked, like stars fallen to the earth, but she did not find them beautiful. She only felt the questions digging deeper into her mind, the doubts she had been trying to press down for weeks. She looked around the apartment, the soft couch where Noah sprawled to watch cartoons, the small dining table where they ate dinner every night, Noah's bedroom, its walls covered in taped-up drawings. All of it came from Vincent. The rent. Vincent paid it. Noah's hospital bills. Vincent paid them. Noah's school. Vincent arranged it. Noah's doctor. Vincent connected her to him. Everything in her life now had Vincent's hand in it. Scarlett pulled her knees to her chest, feeling as if someone had wrapped a fist around her ribs. She had fought for years to stand on her own feet, to depend on no one, to prove she could raise her child without anyone's pity. And now she was living in an apartment she did not pay for, sending her son to a school she did not fund, receiving medical care she could not afford a single dollar of. How was she any different from a parasite? Brittany's words echoed in her head like a bell that would not stop ringing. Single mom with a tragic backstory. Classic. It's nautic. Was she using Vincent's kindness? Had she become a burden without meaning to? Had she turned into the very thing she despised? A woman living off a man. Scarlett thought about the way Vincent looked at her, the moments they shared, the way her heart shifted every time he came near. But now those feelings were covered by a thick fog of doubt. Did she even deserve any of this? Or was she lying to herself, calling it love when it was really dependence wearing a prettier name? Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she wiped them away immediately. She could not cry. Crying would not fix anything. She needed to think. She needed to understand what she truly wanted. She needed to decide whether she could keep living like this. That night, Scarlett did not sleep. She lay staring at the ceiling until dawn seeped through the curtains. And inside her mind, one decision slowly took shape. She needed distance. She needed time to understand herself. And she needed to step away from Vincent, long enough to know whether what she felt was real or just gratitude mistaken for love. The next morning, Scarlett called the Velvet Room and asked for a week off. She told the manager she needed to take care of some personal things, and thankfully no one questioned her too much. She did not know whether Vincent would be told, and she did not want to know. She only needed distance. Space to think. a way to escape the watching eyes and the whispers that had started haunting her at night. The days that followed slipped by in a dull, repeating loop. In the morning, she walked Noah to Lincoln Preschool, watching him run through the gate with his small backpack bouncing on his shoulders. Then she came back to the apartment and sat alone in a silence so deep it felt like it could suffocate her. She tried to read, but she could not focus. She tried to watch movies, but her mind kept drifting away. She looked around the apartment, and every corner reminded her of Vincent, of what he had done for her and Noah, of the doubts gnawing at her from the inside. In the afternoon, she picked Noah up, cooked dinner, bathed him, told him stories, and rocked him to sleep. Those moments with Noah were the only times she felt peaceful, when his clear laughter drowned out the chaos in her head. But when night fell and Noah was asleep, the loneliness came crashing back, along with questions that had no answers. Marcus did not stop by the way he usually did. There were no bags of food outside the door each morning. Scarlett did not know if Vincent knew she was avoiding him and was respecting her choice, or if he had simply given up. Both possibilities left her feeling empty, in different ways. On the fourth night, after she had finally gotten Noah to sleep and was sitting by the window with a warm cup of tea, she heard a knock at the door. Her heart began to race. She knew who it was before she ever looked through the peephole. Vincent stood there in his familiar black suit, hair slicked neatly back, but there was something different in his gray eyes, a tiredness she had never seen before, and something that looked like worry. He held a white envelope in his hand. Scarlett opened the door, not knowing what to say. They faced each other in silence for a moment, until Vincent spoke first. "I heard you took leave," he said, his voice low and gentle. "I thought maybe this would help you see what I see." He held the envelope out toward her. Scarlett stared at it, then at him. She wanted to refuse, wanted to say she did not need anything more from him. But Vincent's eyes held a sincerity so raw she could not force the words out. Finally, she stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in." Vincent entered the apartment and stopped in the middle of the living room without sitting. He looked around, taking in Noah's drawings taped to the wall, Mr. Buttons lying on the sofa, the small home he had arranged for them. Scarlett closed the door, then turned to face him again. She took the envelope from Vincent's hand, her fingers trembling as she opened it. Inside was a neatly folded sheet of paper, and when she unfolded it, she realized it was a typed letter, with a handwritten signature at the bottom. Her heartbeat went wild as she began to read the first line. Scarlett stood by the window, the apartment's yellow light spilling over the paper in her hands. She began to read, and each line felt like a blade carving into the walls she had built over the past several days. "I am writing this letter to speak for Scarlett Morgan, not as an employee, but as a human being. In all my years managing hundreds of people, I have never met anyone who carries so much weight on her shoulders and still finds the strength to lift others. She works double shifts and still smiles. She has nothing, yet she gives everything. She is not here because of pity. She is not here because she begged for help. She is here because this world needs more people like her. I did not help her because I felt sorry for her. I stayed because I chose to, not to rescue her, but to stand beside her. She is the strongest person I have ever known." Scarlett read the last part again and again, the lines beginning to blur in front of her eyes. She did not realize she was crying until the first tear fell onto the page, soaking into the black ink. She pressed the letter to her chest, trying to swallow the sob rising in her throat. All week, she had asked herself if she was using Vincent's kindness, if she was becoming a burden, if what he did for her was only pity wearing a disguise. Brittany's cruel gossip had planted seeds of doubt in her mind, and she had let them take root, spreading, choking out every real feeling she had for Vincent. But now, with this letter in her hands, she understood she had been wrong. Vincent did not look at her like someone weak who needed saving. He looked at her like a fighter, a woman who had lived through storms and stayed standing. Someone he admired, not someone he pitied. He did not give because she needed. He gave because he wanted to stand beside her. Vincent remained there, silent, watching as she read. When Scarlett lifted her eyes to him, her green gaze bright with tears, he stepped closer. "I know what you have been thinking," he said, low and gentle. "I know you think you owe me, that you are depending on me, that you are becoming the thing you hate. But you are wrong, Scarlett." He paused, lifted a hand, and his fingers brushed her cheek, wiping away a tear as it fell. "I am not a good man," he went on, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. "I have done things you do not want to know. I have lived in the dark so long I forgot what light looks like. But when I am with you, with Noah, I remember who I am. I remember who I want to be." Scarlett looked at him, into gray eyes that were no longer cold. She saw honesty there, woundedness, and a longing to belong that she understood too well. Because she felt it too. That same hunger to belong to someone, to not be alone in her fight. "I do not need you to save me, Vincent," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I know," he said. "And that is exactly why I want to be with you. Not because you need me, because I need you. You and Noah have given me what all the money and power in this world cannot buy. A reason to wake up every morning without feeling empty." The letter slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor. Scarlett did not know who moved first, her or him, but in the next heartbeat she was in Vincent's arms. He held her tight but gentle, as if she were the most precious thing he had ever been allowed to touch. And she held him back, resting her head against his chest, listening to his steady, powerful heartbeat. They stayed like that for a long time, inside the small apartment he had found for her, beneath warm yellow light, with Noah's soft breathing drifting from the next room. No more words were needed. For the first time since her parents died, since Ryan left, since she began the lonely war of raising her child, Scarlett allowed herself to lean on another person, and for the first time since his mother died, Vincent did not feel alone anymore. 2 weeks after the night Vincent came to the apartment with the letter, Scarlett's life seemed to find a new rhythm. She returned to the velvet room, let the gossip keep echoing in the shadows, and focused on her work and her son. Vincent still came often, but now there was an invisible thread between them, a bond they both felt even when neither of them said it out loud. Then one afternoon, when Scarlett had just picked Noah up from school and was unlocking the apartment door, she stopped cold. A man stood leaning against the hallway wall, arms crossed, a familiar smile on his mouth that turned her stomach. Ryan. After 4 years, he looked the same, still tall and handsome, hair slicked back, brown eyes that once had been enough to make her fall. But now, looking at him, Scarlett felt only disgust and a vague, crawling fear. "Scarlett," Ryan said, his voice sweet, like he had only stepped out for a few days. "You're prettier than I remember." Noah hid behind his mother's leg, staring at the stranger with wary eyes. He did not know who this man was, and Scarlett wanted to keep it that way forever. "What do you want?" she asked, blunt, her voice cold as ice. Ryan stepped closer. His gaze slid from Scarlett to Noah, then drifted around the apartment door. "I hear you're doing pretty well. Nice place. Your kid's in a good school. And there's a rich man taking care of you." He gave a short, mocking laugh. "A mafia boss, right. You're good, Scarlett. You know how to pick them." Scarlett tightened her grip on Noah's hand and pulled him farther behind her. "You don't have the right to show up here. You left 4 years ago." "I'm the boy's father," Ryan said, his tone hardening. "I have rights, and I want custody." Scarlett's heart seemed to stop for a beat. She stared into Ryan's eyes and saw no love for the child, only cold calculation. He did not want Noah. He wanted money. He wanted to use this situation to squeeze something out of her, or out of Vincent. "You left," Scarlett said, her voice shaking, but firm. "You don't get to come back." Ryan took another step, his eyes turning sharp and threatening. "You think you can stop me? I'll take you to court. I'll tell the judge my son is living with a mafia boss. You think the court's going to side with you?" Scarlett stood in the doorway, not moving an inch, even though inside she was trembling so hard she could barely hold herself together. She knew Ryan could do what he was saying. She knew the system was not always fair. She knew he could turn her life into hell just to feed his own greed. But she did not let him see her fear. In the end, Ryan walked away with a threat that he would be back with a lawyer. When the door finally closed behind him, Scarlett crumpled, dropping to her knees, pulling Noah into her arms, shaking so hard she could not control it. She called Vincent immediately. He arrived within 20 minutes, his face darkening as he listened to her tell him everything. Scarlett saw his jaw tighten, saw his hands curl into fists, saw the fury burning behind his gray eyes. She knew that in Vincent's world, men like Ryan were not allowed to exist for long. But instead of violence, Vincent pulled out his phone and made a call. "Find everything you can on Ryan Davis, everything, and get Harrison on the line." 3 days later, Ryan received a summons from one of New York's top law offices. Inside the envelope was evidence that he had abandoned his child for 4 years, never once sending support, never once reaching out. Along with that came a file on his massive gambling debt, on the jobs he had been fired from for fraud, on the messy life he hid behind a polished smile. Ryan backed off without a sound, vanishing as fast as he had appeared. That night, Scarlett sat in the apartment, Noah asleep, Vincent beside her. She broke down, the tears she had held back for days finally spilling free. "Thank you for not hurting him," she whispered through sobs. "I know you could have." Vincent pulled her into his arms, one hand smoothing over her auburn hair. "That's not who I want to be anymore," he said softly. "Not because of him, because of you, because of Noah." Scarlett lifted her face to his, and in his gray eyes she saw something real. Not the cold mafia boss the whole city feared, but a man learning, slowly, how to love the right way. A month after Ryan disappeared, life seemed to settle back into peace. Scarlett kept working at the Velvet Room. Noah went to school every day with a light step and an easy smile. And Vincent had become something inseparable in the life of mother and son. But Vincent's world was never truly peaceful. And Scarlett was about to face that truth. It started one evening when Vincent came to the apartment with a strain on his face Scarlett had never seen before. He did not sit down. He did not talk the way he usually did. He only looked at her with gray eyes filled with worry and said, short and sharp, "You and Noah need to come with me. Right now." Scarlett wanted to ask why, wanted to understand what was happening. But Vincent's expression told her this was not the moment for questions. She woke Noah quickly, pulled a warm coat onto him, and followed Vincent outside. In the hallway and out on the street, Vincent's real world was waiting for her. 2 black armored SUVs were already at the curb, engines running steady. Marcus stood by the first one, and around him were 4 or 5 men in black suits, faces cold as ice. Beneath their coats, Scarlett caught flashes of weapons tucked neatly out of sight. This was Vincent Russo's real world. Not romantic dinners, not late-night coffee, not soft conversations in quiet corners, but guns, armored vehicles, and men ready to kill and ready to die for their boss. They got into the cars without a word. Noah sat in Scarlett's lap, still half asleep, not understanding what was happening. Vincent sat across from them, phone pressed to his ear, issuing orders in a cold voice she had never heard from him before. "Find where they are. Secure every route. Don't let anyone get close." When the call ended, Vincent looked at Scarlett. In his eyes was exhaustion, and something that looked almost like shame. "One of my rivals," he explained, voice low. "They found my weakness. They threatened to hurt you and Noah to force my hand." Scarlett felt the blood in her body turn to ice. She looked down at Noah curled against her, and a raw, primal fear rose in her chest. Her son, a 4-year-old innocent child, being threatened by people she did not even know, only because she had loved the wrong man. Or more truthfully, because she had loved the right man in the wrong circumstances. "I'm taking you somewhere safe," Vincent continued. "And when this is over, if you want to leave, I'll understand. I won't stop you." He stared out the window, avoiding her eyes. "This is my life, Scarlett. This is the world I live in, and I don't have the right to drag you and Noah into it." The SUVs stopped in front of a mansion on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by a tall fence and security cameras. They were escorted inside, where more men in black suits stood guard. Scarlett settled Noah into a bed in a secure room, tucked the blanket around him, then walked back into the living room where Vincent stood alone by the window. "I'm not leaving," she said, her voice so firm it surprised even her. Vincent turned to her, his eyes widening. "I've been running my whole life," Scarlett went on, stepping closer. "Running from the pain of losing my parents, running from Ryan, running from hardship. I'm tired of running. I don't want to run anymore. She stopped in front of him and lifted her face to his, meeting those gray eyes that held too many emotions. "I'm staying. With you. No matter what your world looks like." Before Vincent could answer, small footsteps sounded behind them. Noah ran out, still sleepy, but he had seen Vincent. He wrapped his arms around Vincent's leg, looking up with wide, worried eyes. "Uncle Vincent, don't let the bad people take you, okay?" Vincent bent, lifted Noah into his arms, and held him close. "I promise," he said, his voice thick, catching on something he could not swallow. 2 days later, Marcus called to say the threat had been handled. No details, no explanations, only 2 words. Safe now. They returned to their apartment in Brooklyn, and life continued. But something had changed. Scarlett had seen Vincent's real world and still chose to stay. And Vincent knew he had finally found someone willing to stand beside him, in the dark as well as in the light. Exactly 1 year after that fateful night, snow fell again over the streets of Brooklyn. But this time Scarlett was not standing beneath a streetlight with an old backpack on her shoulder and a 4-year-old child in her arms. This time she stood inside the Velvet Room, the place that had become her second home, wearing a simple red dress, elegant in its quiet way, one Vincent had arranged to have made for her without ever saying a word. Tonight the bar was not open to regular customers. Vincent had closed it for a private Christmas party for the staff, close friends, and the people he truly cared about. It was the first time in 10 years he had hosted a real Christmas gathering, not a lavish display meant to impress business partners, but a warm night of togetherness with the people he considered family. The velvet room was decorated so beautifully Scarlett almost did not recognize the place where she worked night after night. Soft yellow lights wrapped around the wooden columns. Fresh green wreaths hung on the walls, giving off a gentle pine scent, and a Christmas tree stood in the corner, nearly brushing the ceiling, sparkling with hundreds of crystal ornaments and a golden star at the top. At the bar, glasses of eggnog and hot chocolate were served instead of the usual whiskey and cocktails. Christmas music played softly from the speakers, blending with people's laughter into the warmest kind of symphony the place had ever known. The staff of the Velvet Room were all there, including Brittany, who had grown much quieter after watching Scarlett face every challenge this past year with her head held high. Marcus stood near the front entrance as always, but there was a rare, small smile on his face as he watched his boss. Dr. Reynolds arrived with his wife, chatting easily with other guests. And there were many more faces Scarlett had come to know over the year, people who had become part of Vincent's circle. And now, somehow, part of her life too. Vincent stood beside Scarlett, one hand resting gently at the small of her back, his gray eyes never leaving her for long. He wore a black suit as usual, but instead of his typical dark tie, he had on a red bow tie Noah had chosen for him. "You have to match me," the boy had insisted that morning, and Vincent, the Mafia boss all of New York feared, had agreed without a single complaint. Around 8 in the evening, when the party was at its peak, Vincent stepped onto the small stage at the back of the club and tapped the microphone lightly. The room quieted, turning toward him. "Thank you all for coming," he said, his voice low, but warmer than Scarlett had ever heard it. "A year ago, on Christmas night, I was a lonely man at a lavish party I did not want to attend. I thought I had everything, but in truth, I had nothing." His gaze found Scarlett, and his gray eyes brightened. "Then I met a woman and a little boy under a streetlight, in falling snow, and they changed everything." People turned to look at Scarlett, but she did not feel shame the way she once might have. She smiled, eyes shining. "Tonight," Vincent continued, "I want to introduce something special. Noah, come up here." From behind, Noah ran onto the stage, wearing a crisp white shirt with a red bow tie at his throat, his small shoes polished until they shone. He was 5 now, taller, more confident than the trembling child Scarlett had held in the snow 1 year ago. Mr. Buttons did not follow him everywhere anymore, but Scarlett knew the bear still lay on his bed every night. A small piano had already been set on the stage. Vincent had hired a music teacher for Noah for the past 6 months, and this was the first time the boy would perform for a crowd. Noah sat on the piano bench, his feet swinging because they did not reach the floor. He looked down at the black and white keys, took a deep breath, and began to play. A simple melody filled the quiet space of the Velvet Room. Clear notes, sometimes stumbling just a little, but overflowing with honest feeling. Noah had composed this piece with the help of his teacher, and he had given it a name. "Santa, we found home." Scarlett lifted a hand to cover her mouth, tears rising faster than she could stop them. She looked at her son, the child who once asked if Santa would be able to find them in the cold snow, now sitting on a stage playing the piano with a radiant smile. The entire club held perfectly still. No one spoke. No one took a sip of their drink. Everyone listened as a 5-year-old told his story through music. When the final note rang out and faded into the air, there was a brief, stunned silence. Then applause exploded, rolling through the Velvet Room. People stood, cheering, many wiping tears from their faces. Noah rose and bowed, grinning, then ran off the stage toward his mother. Scarlett wrapped him in her arms, crying and laughing at the same time. "You did so well," she whispered into Noah's ear. "I am so proud of you." "I'm 7, Tinnited." Noah looked up at her, eyes bright. "Mom, Santa really found us, didn't he?" The applause slowly died down, but the air inside the Velvet Room still trembled with emotion. Scarlett held Noah in her arms, happy tears still clinging to her lashes. She did not realize Vincent had come up beside them until he leaned down and whispered something into Noah's ear. The boy's eyes lit up, and he nodded eagerly, like he had just been given the most important secret mission of his life. Vincent placed a tiny red velvet box in Noah's hands, and Noah took it with both palms, careful, as if he were holding treasure. Then Vincent straightened and stepped in front of Scarlett. He did not kneel the way men do in romantic movies. He stood there, level with her, looking straight into her eyes with gray eyes that were no longer cold, but warmer than any fire. "1 year ago," he began, his voice low but clear enough for everyone in the room to hear. "I was a man who had everything and still had nothing. I had money, power, an empire, but I did not have a home, no one to return to, no one who would remember me when I was gone." He paused, glanced at Noah standing beside him with the velvet box clutched to his chest, then looked back at Scarlett. Then I met you. And this boy. And my life changed forever. The entire room went so quiet you could almost hear the soft fall of snow against the windows. I am not perfect, Vincent continued. I have done things I am not proud of. I lived in the dark for too long. But with you, with Noah, I want to be better. I want to wake up every morning and see you both there. I want to be part of something bigger than myself. He did not take the box from Noah. Instead, he rested a hand on the boy's shoulder, and the two of them faced Scarlett together, like a team. Can I stay? Vincent asked, and his voice trembled for the first time since Scarlett had known him. Not as your boss, not as your protector, but as your family. Before Scarlett could answer, Noah cut in, his voice bright and serious enough to make the whole room laugh. Only if you bring hot chocolate home every night. We're doing as Ganter. Vincent laughed, a real laugh, rare, the one Scarlett had learned to love. I promise, kid. Then both of them looked at Scarlett, waiting. She looked at Vincent, the man who had stepped into her life on its coldest night and never truly left. She looked at Noah, her son who had found the father he deserved, and she looked into her own heart, where the answer had been waiting for a long time. Yes, she said, her voice thick with tears but steady. Stay. At a 9. Noah squealed with joy and handed the velvet box to Vincent. Vincent opened it and lifted out a simple silver ring, elegant in its quiet craftsmanship. Inside the band was a small engraving Scarlett had to bring close to her eyes to read. Family is a choice. Vincent slid the ring onto her finger, and in that moment, applause rose again, thundering through the velvet room. But this time Scarlett heard nothing but her own heartbeat, keeping time with the man in front of her and the little boy hugging both their legs. After the party, the three of them stepped outside. Snow drifted down softly, settling on their shoulders like blessings from the sky. The streets were quiet, lit only by blinking Christmas lights and the crunch of their footsteps on the snow. Noah held his mother's hand on one side and Vincent's hand on the other, walking between them with a grin too bright to hide. They passed the streetlight where, 1 year earlier, Scarlett had stood exhausted with her child in her arms, not knowing where they would sleep that night. She stopped and looked up at it, then looked at Vincent. This is where everything began, she said softly. Vincent nodded. This is where I found what I did not even know I was searching for. Action, sir. Noah looked up at his mother, round eyes full of curiosity. Mom, did Santa finally find us? Scarlett bent down to Noah's height. She looked at Noah, then at Vincent, standing beside them, and she smiled. He sent us someone even better than anything I ever dared to dream. And the three of them kept walking through the snowy night, hand in hand, like a real family. Not a family made by blood, a family built by choice, by love, by the moments they decided to stay, even when life was hard. Family is not always the people we were born with. Sometimes family is the people who choose to stay when everyone else has already left. Sometimes family is a stranger who stops under a streetlight on a snowy night and asks if you need help. Sometimes family is a 4-year-old boy asking a powerful stranger if he can tell Santa they moved. And sometimes, just sometimes, Santa really does listen and sends a miracle.